Okay, in this video I just wanted to run through some kind of best practices when using an SSD drive on the Panasonic GH6. So if you're already up and running using SSD, then you likely sort of won't really gain that much from this. It's more to people just kind of starting out with it. First off, Panasonic's got an approved list of SSDs that work with the camera. So it's worth kind of checking this if you're planning on buying a new SSD. It's worth buying one from the supported list. You know, if you're buying it especially just to do this, you may as well buy one that you know is going to work. But if you've got an existing drive already, it may well work, but you'll have to format it. And I did a video on that before, so I'll link to that above. So if you've got an existing drive, format it in the camera, and you'll be able to see if that kind of drive works with the camera or not. I mean, the main takeaway really from that is just that you can't use any drives above 2 terabytes, and that's kind of regardless of brand. Just anything over 2 terabytes currently is not supported. The next thing is that you'll need to use the cable that came with your drive. So that should be a USB-C to USB-C cable. So the port on the side of the camera, it's a USB-C 3.2. So that's the USB port on the side there. And the one on your drive, the supported drives, like I say, they're all USB-C drives. So it will be a USB-C to USB-C cable. So here's one here, just two of the same on each end, USB-C. Panasonic saying that you can't use adapters or hubs, or so if you've got, say, like a USB-A to USB-C cable, you can't use a USB-C to USB-C adapter. I've not tried that. I mean, it's not really a recommended thing when you're trying to offload video onto a drive. You don't really want little adapters and hubs and things on there. So I mean, it's not really recommended, but it's not to say it wouldn't work if you tried it. So I think really, like I say, you know, you're best off using a supported drive and a USB-C to USB-C cable. The next thing, if you switch on USB SSD before connecting the drive on the camera, so if we get into the camera and we'll switch the drive on, so let's just close the door on it. So if we jump in, so we just need to go into the menu button. And in the camera, we want to go to the wrench or spanner here. And then in the next bit, it's card and file. So it's the one at the top. And you can see here, just under the double card slot function, we've got USB SSD. And by default, that's going to be set to off because we're just using our cards here. So I haven't got a CF Express card in, but if you had CF Express as well, it'd be 1 and 2. I've just got 2 down there. I can actually, I'll plug that in quickly because you're probably more likely to see it with the 1 and the 2. So if I put that down there, and you'll see now 1 and 2. So that's my 2 cards. If we jump back, and when we want to use the SSD, we can switch this on. And what you'll find when we switch it on, we're going to have please wait where it's looking for the SSD drive. And then we've got no USB SSD found. So now it's switched on, we can connect the drive to the camera. So it's essentially at the moment we're in SSD on. So if I went to record now, we get that same message because the camera is trying to record to SSD regardless of whether there's one connected. So if we plug this drive in, and just plug that into the USB port on the side, we get the please wait message, and then now you can see we've got an SSD icon at the bottom, so we're ready to record. So if we were to hit record now, we can actually start recording over SSD. So you can do it the other way around. You can plug in the SSD and then switch on SSD recording, and we can do it that way around. So if we turn off SSD recording, and then we just wait until the end. Then if I unplug that, and then what I can do, so we're on the cards now, but if I plug in the SSD drive, So you can kind of see nothing's happened, we're still just on the card. So it's not going to record to SSD just because the drive's plugged in. It's not aware of it yet because SSD recording mode's not switched on. So if we jump in again, switch it on, and the drive's already connected this time, so we won't obviously get that no SSD message. It's just connect straight to the drive, hit record, and then now we're recording over SSD again. So you just have to kind of remember that that's the way it works. It's not going to record to SSD just because you've plugged the drive in. It needs to be aware that that's there. There may be occasions where you plug it in and it doesn't recognise the drive. If that happens, the best thing to do is just make sure that SSD icon's not there. Obviously, if it's not recognising it, it shouldn't be. But just make sure that's not there. You could unplug it and then sort of try it again. It's possible at that point that it will be to do with formatting. So I mentioned before that for the camera to be able to use the SSD, it needs to be formatted to work with the camera. I've done a video about that, so there's a link above on how to do that. Even if you formatted the drive in a computer, you'll need to do it again in camera so it can actually work with the camera. So just sort of be aware of that it will need to be formatted. And obviously, you know, if you're going to format it, make sure the drive is clear and you're not about to delete things that you need. Another thing to sort of consider is whilst you're formatting the drive, don't touch the camera or don't touch the USB cable. Just let the drive format. Depending on how much is on the drive, it may take slightly longer than others. If it's a brand new drive, it will be a really quick process, so you know it really won't take long at all. And again, that's going to remove everything from the drive, so if it is a drive you're using, just make sure everything's backed up that you need. One of the main things to bear in mind whilst you're using SSD recording is that with the camera, one of the things we do have whilst we're recording to cards, we've got oh sorry, I've got backup recording on. One of the main things we do have is when we're recording, if I jump into that, no, I can't do that, that's all intro, that's the one I wanted. Whilst we're recording, we've got down here, it's going to tell us the cards that we're recording to, and they will go red. And that is the same with SSD, but we get this message and we get the light down here. So, you know, we've got a lot of warnings that, you know, the camera's recording, the card's being used, don't eject the card. But with the SSD is an external drive. So when we're using it, we can switch on our SSD feature again, plug it in, and then just same process again. So if we record now, you can see our SSD is highlighted red, but there's no real way. It is a lot quicker. The SSD drive tends to clear really quickly, so if we hit stop, you'll find that won't stay red for very long. It almost instantaneously is writing to the card, but obviously the longer the video you write, there could be more of it to sort of clean up afterwards. So just be really aware of when this is red, that you're not pulling the cable out, you're not trying to you know, you're not trying to do anything on the camera, you don't switch the camera off. If you turn off SSD recording whilst that's still red, what the camera should do is just realise that the please wait screen will come up and it will complete the files that go into the card, and then it will switch it off and switch back to the internal card. So but just be really clear on, like, when that's red, you just don't sort of pull the cable out or switch the camera off or try to do anything that's going to affect the writing of that file. Just kind of let it finish. Much the same as the cards, you know, you don't pull the cards out straight after you've written something. So when we're shooting over SSD, there are some restrictions, and I've gone over that in another video, and I'll link to that above. But one thing to bear in mind that I didn't really cover in that video is that when we're shooting SSD with the camera, we're actually powering the SSD as well. So that is going to reduce the battery life. So If you're planning on shooting for longer periods, you'll probably need to consider buying extra batteries, and obviously plan for the stops where you've got to have the battery out and put a new battery in. Or if you need sort of non-stop longer recording, you're going to have to consider something like an external battery solution. And then really the final thing to kind of go over is just when we've got the drive connected, it's quite important that you don't just pull the USB lead out. It's essentially, once it's in SSD mode, you know, the drive really needs to be ejected, just like you would on you know, a Mac or a PC. It's just a case of sort of breaking that connection before you actually take the drive out. So you just need to come into USB SSD, switch that off, and then it does that kind of ejecting process and it jumps back onto the cards, and then you're free to pull the cable out. So just be sure that you're doing that and you're not just kind of pulling the cable out, because a real worst case scenario with this is that, you know, you've got a lot of files going to this drive because it's a big drive. You know, if you haven't uploaded your footage for an hour, a couple of hours, you really don't want to corrupt the drive. So just be sure that you are doing that. You're sort of following those best practices of switching the mode off, removing the drive safely. That way it's just, you know, it's one less thing to worry about. Then in regards to how much footage you can capture over SSD, again, I've done another kind of video about that, which I'll link above. It is a lot. I mean, it's probably really, SSD's probably mainly worth it if you either have one of the drives and you can't afford a CF Express card, or you mainly want to shoot in say the higher or intro modes, or in ProRes exclusively. And yeah, there's a link to kind of what you can get on there. But yeah, it's a massive improvement on what you can get on some of the cards for, you know, cost wise. And then that's it really. So yeah, hopefully that's helped. If it has, give the video a like. If you want to see more content on the Panasonic GH6, then please subscribe to the channel.